There is a kind of silence that can echo louder than thunder, a silence that doesn't signal absence, but presence. It is the silence that unsettles, provokes, and dominates without uttering a single word. Imagine standing in a room after an argument, when the shouting stops, and no one dares to speak. The quiet that follows feels heavier than sound itself. In that moment, whoever holds their composure, whoever doesn't rush to fill the void, suddenly owns the room. That is not emptiness. That is control. We live in an age obsessed with expression. Every platform rewards noise, tweets, posts, opinions, debates. Everyone wants to be heard, to defend, to respond. The modern man fears silence because silence feels like invisibility. But the paradox is brutal. In a world where everyone fights to be heard, the one who refuses to speak gains the most power. Silence becomes a weapon, an armor, and a test of inner strength. This is what we call Machiavellian silence. A silence born not from timidity, but from strategy. Niccolò Machiavelli, one of history's most misunderstood thinkers, understood that words reveal, and revelation invites vulnerability. The wise ruler, he said, does not speak to express emotion but to control perception. Machiavelli saw human interaction as a chessboard of power, where every word is a move that can expose weakness. To stay silent is to withhold the next move, to keep others guessing, doubting, overanalyzing, revealing their own hands. Those who understand human nature know that silence has a unique psychological effect. It creates discomfort. People fear uncertainty more than truth. When someone doesn't respond, the mind rushes to fill the void with assumptions, often projecting its own insecurities onto the silence. That's why in negotiation rooms, interrogation cells, or even arguments between lovers, the one who can remain silent longer often wins. Because silence makes others reveal themselves. It exposes what they cannot hide. To stay silent in a reactive world is not weakness. It is mastery. It is the art of conserving energy while others waste theirs. The person who stays calm when provoked, who remains unreadable when challenged, holds the psychological upper hand. Machiavellian silence is not about withdrawal. It's about dominance through restraint. It's about creating space so vast that others lose balance trying to interpret it. Power, after all, is rarely loud. The lion doesn't roar before the hunt. The strategist doesn't announce his next move. And the truly confident don't need to prove their worth with words. Their silence is their message, a signal that they've transcended the need for validation. In the coming chapters, we will explore this ancient power further. The way Machiavelli and others throughout history mastered silence, not as surrender, but as supremacy. The kind of stillness that commands fear, respect, and obedience. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one who has nothing left to say. Niccolò Machiavelli never glorified brute strength. He admired something far more dangerous: control. To him, true power didn't belong to the loudest or most aggressive, but to the one who could remain composed when others were consumed by chaos. In The Prince, he laid out a philosophy that has haunted politics, business, and human behavior for centuries. The illusion of control is often more powerful than control itself. Machiavelli understood that the world doesn't reward authenticity, it rewards perception. To survive in the treacherous landscape of Renaissance Italy, a ruler couldn't afford to be transparent. He had to be unpredictable, unreadable, and strategically silent. Silence wasn't weakness, it was camouflage. A prince who speaks too often reveals his fears and intentions, but one who withholds his words keeps everyone else guessing. In a world built on manipulation, silence becomes the ultimate disguise. Men judge more by the eye than by the hand, Machiavelli wrote. People are drawn not to truth, but to image. They respect composure more than confession. When a leader maintains poise amidst crisis, he appears invincible, even if internally he trembles. The performance of strength often matters more than strength itself. This is why Machiavelli believed it is better to appear virtuous than to actually be virtuous. Appearance commands obedience, while confession invites vulnerability. Throughout history, silence has been the chosen language of the powerful. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, ruled not through fiery speeches but through calm presence. He understood that reacting emotionally made one predictable, and predictability is the death of influence. Queen Elizabeth I mastered this art too. Her silence in matters of politics and love created endless speculation, strengthening her aura of mystique. Even in the modern world, leaders like Vladimir Putin weaponize silence. Long pauses, unreadable expressions, and delayed responses, they unsettle opponents and command psychological dominance. Machiavelli would have admired this. He would have seen silence as a calculated pause, a way to make others overthink, overreach, and reveal their motives. Every moment of silence invites others to fill the space with their anxieties. The human mind hates uncertainty. It begins to project, interpret, and unravel itself. Thus, silence manipulates without words. It forces others into confession while the silent one remains untouched. But Machiavellian silence isn't confined to palaces and parliaments. It plays out in everyday hierarchies, the office, the family, the social circle. The person who doesn't react emotionally becomes the gravitational center of any room. When others argue, justify, or plead, their noise exposes them. But the one who stays composed, listening, watching, saying little, draws power naturally. People start to wonder what they're thinking, how they feel, or what they'll do next. Their silence becomes presence. Their restraint becomes command. Machiavelli's doctrine of control was simple yet ruthless. The less you reveal, the more others reveal to you. Every silence you hold is a mirror, reflecting the insecurities of those who cannot bear the quiet. And in that reflection lies your advantage. Because power, in its purest form, is not in domination. It is in psychological stillness. The art of appearing calm while quietly controlling everything beneath the surface. Human beings are creatures of response. We crave reaction like oxygen, to be acknowledged, validated, seen. Every message left unread, every insult unanswered, every silence unbroken feels like an assault on our existence. Because deep within the human psyche lies an instinct that predates civilization itself, the need to assert presence through reaction. To react is to say, I am here, I matter. But this compulsion, this addiction to responding, is also the easiest way to be controlled. Our brains are wired for closure. When we encounter tension, uncertainty, or threat, the limbic system lights up, demanding resolution. Silence or ambiguity creates discomfort, a void the mind desperately wants to fill. This is why arguments online spiral endlessly, why people feel compelled to explain themselves, and why in politics or relationships, the one who responds emotionally always loses ground. The desire to react is the desire to relieve psychological discomfort, not to seek truth, but to escape unease. And whoever can trigger that unease controls you. This is the invisible psychology of power. The moment you react, you have already shifted the center of gravity away from yourself. When someone provokes you, a critic, a manipulator, a political figure, and you rush to defend your name or justify your choices, you are no longer acting from strength. You are acting from the need to prove. And the need to prove is the shadow of insecurity. Carl Jung described this phenomenon as the shadow, the hidden, repressed part of the self that longs for validation and fears rejection. When you react impulsively to criticism, what truly erupts is not reason, but the shadow screaming for acknowledgement. The ego cannot stand the idea of being unseen or misunderstood. It wants to dominate the narrative, to win the last word. And so we respond. We argue. We explain. We hand over the steering wheel of our emotions, thinking we are fighting back, when in truth, we are being directed. In the digital age, this psychological mechanism has become a weapon. Social media algorithms thrive on reaction, outrage, offense, moral posturing. Each click, each heated comment, each anxious defense feeds the machinery of manipulation. The systems that govern us have learned something the ancient Stoics already knew, that emotional control is the highest form of power. He who cannot control his reaction is already a servant. Now contrast this with the philosophy of restraint. The Stoics, from Marcus Aurelius to Epictetus, taught that freedom begins the moment you cease to be enslaved by your emotions. To remain calm when provoked is not passivity, it is the ultimate act of dominance over self. In a world of noise, silence becomes a weapon. When others rage, the one who does not respond becomes the axis around which the storm rotates. The quiet one dictates tempo, rhythm, and atmosphere. Their composure unsettles others precisely because it cannot be manipulated. Modern psychology supports this ancient wisdom. Studies in social dynamics reveal that people subconsciously interpret silence as confidence, mystery, even superiority. The restrained individual is perceived as in control, while the reactive one appears desperate for validation. This is why the calm negotiator often wins, why the unbothered leader inspires respect, and why those who respond less are feared more. Their silence invites projection. Others fill the gap with their own assumptions, often granting more power than words ever could. Reaction is instinct. Restraint is mastery. To respond impulsively is to obey biology. To remain still is to command it. True control does not come from domination over others, but from sovereignty over self. Imagine a psychological chessboard. Every provocation is a move designed to make you flinch. Each reaction reveals your strategy, your weakness, your fear. But the one who waits, who watches, who does not rush to fill the silence, they play a different game. They force the opponent to reveal themselves first. In that stillness lies power, because restraint is not the absence of feeling, it is the redirection of energy. It is choosing not to spend emotion on what does not deserve it. In a world that worships reaction, the quiet mind becomes revolutionary. The man who does not flinch when attacked, who does not justify when accused, who does not explain when misunderstood, that man becomes untouchable. He owns his inner kingdom completely. And in a civilization built on noise, distraction, and outrage, such control is the rarest and most formidable power of all. In human relationships, silence is never neutral. It is either a weapon or a shield, depending on who wields it. Every connection we form, whether friendship, romance, or professional alliance, operates within an invisible field of power. Beneath the words, gestures, and affection lies a constant negotiation for control, validation, and emotional territory. When one person becomes silent, the balance shifts. What begins as stillness quickly turns into psychological noise for the other. The human ego is addicted to reaction. We equate attention with worth, engagement with existence. When someone withdraws communication, when messages go unanswered or emotions are not mirrored, the ego begins to panic. It interprets silence not as absence, but as rejection, a threat to its constructed image of importance. Suddenly, the mind begins to spin stories. Did I do something wrong? Have I lost value? Why are they not responding? This is not love nor curiosity. It is fear of invisibility. The ego thrives on recognition, and silence starves it. This is where power quietly emerges. The person who can endure silence without the need for immediate reassurance possesses psychological dominance. They are not playing games, they are mastering self-containment. Because silence, in its purest form, is emotional control, the ability to regulate one's impulses instead of being ruled by them. It creates space, and in that space, truth reveals itself. The anxious partner exposes their insecurity. The manipulative friend shows their dependency. The domineering boss reveals their need for compliance. In relationships, silence becomes the ultimate test of self-mastery. Modern social psychology explains this through concepts like intermittent reinforcement and the scarcity effect. Intermittent reinforcement describes how unpredictable rewards create stronger attachment, the same mechanism that keeps gamblers addicted or lovers obsessing over inconsistent partners. The silence of one person acts as that unpredictability, intensifying the other's emotional investment. Likewise, the scarcity effect shows that when something becomes less available, its perceived value multiplies. In relationships, emotional scarcity, being less accessible, less reactive, paradoxically elevates one's significance. Consider negotiation rooms where executives remain quiet after an offer. The silence pressures the other side to speak first, often leading them to reveal too much or make unnecessary concessions. In romantic dynamics, the partner who doesn't rush to respond gains gravity. Their stillness demands attention. In friendships, the individual who doesn't constantly explain or justify their choices earns respect, not by arrogance, but by clarity of boundaries. Even in public debates, the person who remains composed while others shout appears more intelligent, more in control. Silence, when used wisely, reframes perception. In the digital world, silence carries new weight. A delayed reply, a seen but unanswered message, a deliberate absence from social media. These subtle pauses trigger waves of insecurity in others. People mistake accessibility for connection, forgetting that true connection cannot be measured by constant interaction. Silence, in this context, becomes rebellion against digital dependency. It's not manipulation, it's self-preservation. Machiavellian silence is not cruelty, it is restraint disguised as mystery. It is the refusal to be emotionally reactive in a culture that demands constant exposure. To withhold reaction is to assert control over one's own emotional economy. It sends a message without uttering a word. My peace is not for sale. My attention must be earned. The art of silence in relationships is not about domination, but detachment. The calm awareness that your value does not depend on how others perceive or respond to you. The one who can remain still when others demand reaction transcends the need to prove. They operate from an inner equilibrium that cannot be negotiated, manipulated, or seduced. In a world obsessed with attention, that kind of silence is the loudest statement of all. There was a time when silence meant wisdom, when thinkers, mystics, and leaders retreated from the world to refine their minds in solitude. But in the 21st century, silence has become almost suspicious. To be quiet is to risk being forgotten. To pause is to risk irrelevance. We live in an era that measures existence through engagement. The clicks, the comments, the constant stream of reaction. The digital world has turned human attention into currency, and every notification is a tiny bell demanding your soul to respond. Modern society suffers from a sickness, the disease of constant response. Every opinion begs for a counter-opinion. Every post demands acknowledgement. Every insult provokes defense. The human mind, once capable of reflection, has been rewired for immediacy. We have mistaken reaction for intelligence and noise for connection. The platforms we live on, the digital empires of distraction, have transformed communication into a psychological battlefield where silence feels like defeat. But beneath this constant stimulation lies something darker: dependency. The dopamine economy thrives on our inability to stay still. Every like, retweet, or comment releases a microscopic hit of pleasure, a digital pat on the back that tells us, you exist, you matter. And so we keep posting, responding, arguing, chasing validation like addicts begging for another fix. The fear of being misunderstood or forgotten keeps us trapped in endless cycles of explanation. We respond not to express truth, but to maintain visibility. Nietzsche saw this disease long before it took digital form. He called it the herd mentality, the psychological need to belong, to blend, to shout with the crowd rather than think in solitude. He warned that those who cannot bear to be alone will always be slaves to the noise of others. In today's world, that prophecy has materialized. The herd has gone online, and every scroll through a feed is a chorus of voices terrified of being unseen. Everyone is talking, but few are saying anything. Everyone is visible, but few are truly seen. In this new world, silence becomes rebellion. To not respond is to reclaim control. To not explain yourself is to assert freedom. In a digital culture built on emotional reaction, the refusal to react is the highest form of intelligence. The calm person, unprovoked and unbothered, is not detached, they are powerful. They have transcended the need for recognition, which means they cannot be manipulated by it. Consider the chaos of constant notifications, the flashing lights, the vibrations, the urgency that keeps your nervous system on high alert. Now contrast that with the serenity of stillness. No sound, no validation, no external approval. That stillness terrifies most people because it forces them to confront themselves. Without the world's noise to mirror their worth, they feel hollow. But that emptiness is precisely where real strength is born. The loudest people crave validation because silence exposes their inner void. But the quiet ones, the ones who can stay still in a world addicted to attention, they are building empires in silence. They are not seen because they do not need to be. Their power is internal, not performative. While the world exhausts itself in reaction, they conserve energy for creation. The disease of constant response is not just digital, it is spiritual. It robs us of presence, of depth, of discernment. To cure it, one must rediscover the discipline of silence, not as absence, but as sovereignty. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, the true master speaks less, because he already knows that power does not come from being seen, but from being still. There is a kind of power that does not announce itself. It does not shout, argue, or demand to be noticed. It observes, and in that observation, it learns everything it needs to control the outcome. This is the essence of strategic silence, the ability to influence not through expression, but through restraint. It is not passivity, it is precision. It is the art of doing nothing outwardly while everything is moving inwardly in your favor. Sun Tzu, in The Art of War, wrote that supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. The silent strategist wins before the first word is spoken. He knows that reaction is the language of the impulsive, while patience is the dialect of power. Every pause is a calculation, every silence, a statement. The most dangerous opponent is not the one who talks the most, but the one who listens the longest. Niccolò Machiavelli echoed the same wisdom in a different arena, politics. In The Prince, he advised rulers to be a great pretender and dissembler, meaning that the appearance of stillness, calmness, or even ignorance can be a cloak for dominance. When a ruler speaks too often, he exposes his intentions. But when he withholds his thoughts, his enemies project their fears into his silence. In that projection, they reveal more than he ever could. The Machiavellian understands that words are liabilities, silence is armor. Strategic silence operates through three psychological techniques: subtle, invisible, yet immensely powerful. The first is the pause principle. It is the deliberate act of waiting before responding, not to stall, but to assert control. The pause interrupts emotional momentum. It turns chaos into clarity. In business negotiations, the person who pauses first forces the other to fill the void, often revealing their true position. In personal arguments, silence after a provocation unsettles the aggressor, because humans are conditioned to expect reaction. The one who pauses dictates the rhythm of communication, and therefore holds the tempo of power. The second is selective engagement, the discipline of choosing which battles to fight and which to let dissolve into noise. Most people engage out of insecurity, feeling compelled to prove themselves. But the strategist knows that by ignoring provocations, they redirect energy toward what truly matters. Silence disarms the manipulator. It suffocates gossip. It exposes the emptiness of drama. In politics, diplomacy, and leadership, this principle creates the aura of authority, the quiet confidence of someone who does not need to respond to be respected. The third is controlled ambiguity. It is the ability to let your silence speak in multiple directions. People project their own narratives into your quietness: respect, fear, admiration, confusion. The key is to allow that projection to work for you. Great leaders, diplomats, and thinkers have mastered this art. When Winston Churchill would pause before answering a difficult question, or when corporate icons like Steve Jobs stayed silent during product criticisms, the effect was not weakness but mystique. The audience leaned in closer. Silence became gravity. In every field, from diplomacy to boardrooms, from politics to art, silence is not the absence of voice but the refinement of it. It sharpens perception. It makes every eventual word heavier, more deliberate, more respected. True communicators do not speak endlessly. They listen with intention. They understand that silence is not the opposite of speech. It is the foundation upon which all meaningful speech is built. To master strategic silence is to master timing, perception, and influence. In a world drowning in noise, the person who can remain still becomes the loudest voice of all. There is a silence that comes not from absence, but from power, a silence born of mastery over the self. Most people imagine silence as an act of the mouth. But in truth, it begins much deeper, in the mind that refuses to be ruled by impulse, in the heart that does not tremble when provoked. The ability to withhold a reaction is not the mark of weakness or coldness. It is the mark of someone who has transcended the animal need to prove, defend, or dominate. To remain unmoved when the world demands a reaction requires an invisible strength, a kind of discipline that cannot be taught through words, only through inner conquest. Nietzsche called this Selbstüberwindung, self-overcoming. He believed that the greatest victory a man could achieve was not over enemies or nations, but over his own chaos. The one who has conquered himself no longer fears misunderstanding or insult. He does not need to prove his worth through constant response because his worth no longer depends on the opinions of others. This is where silence transforms from tactic to transcendence. When the ego dissolves, reaction becomes unnecessary. A person who understands their own emotions does not suppress them. They channel them. Suppression is fragile. It hides emotion beneath layers of tension, pretending calm while burning inside. But control is different. Control is clarity, the ability to feel everything yet choose when, how, and whether to express it. It is emotional intelligence raised to the level of art. To withhold is not to be numb, it is to be aware. It is to look at anger, fear, and pride as passing storms, powerful but temporary. The silent individual is not a void, he is a vessel of measured energy. When he speaks, his words carry the weight of thought. When he pauses, the pause itself speaks louder than noise. True silence, then, becomes a mirror of inner peace. It reflects a soul that has made peace with its contradictions. In a world built on instant gratification and emotional volatility, this kind of restraint appears almost supernatural. It is the stillness of a mountain amid thunder, the composure of a mind that no longer dances to the rhythm of other people's chaos. To withhold, to wait, to observe, this is the highest form of power because it begins where all true mastery begins. Not in controlling the world, but in mastering oneself. When you no longer need to respond, you are finally free. In the end, the most powerful sound in the world is not the roar of victory or the cry of defiance. It is silence. The kind that doesn't beg to be understood, doesn't rush to be justified, and doesn't crumble under the weight of misunderstanding. It is the silence of someone who no longer needs to prove their worth, because they have already seen what lies beneath the surface of noise, and found it hollow. The one who has mastered silence is no longer at war with perception. They have transcended the childish urge to be seen, to be right, to be loud. They walk through chaos as if untouched, because their strength no longer depends on recognition. The world may misread them, attack them, try to provoke them into breaking composure, but they remain still, not because they are passive, but because they understand that real control requires no performance. This is the voice beyond words, the kind that cannot be heard, only felt. It exists in the way a person holds their gaze, the calm between their sentences, the ease with which they carry themselves. It's the presence that draws attention without asking for it. The paradox of silence is that the less you reveal, the more others project onto you. What they cannot define, they must respect or fear. In an age intoxicated with expression, silence has become the ultimate rebellion. Every platform screams for response, every conversation demands participation, yet the wise remain still. Not out of indifference, but out of understanding. They know that energy spent reacting is energy lost mastering oneself. This is what Machiavelli understood. Power is not in speaking first, but in speaking last, or not at all. And what Nietzsche foresaw was this: those who can bear silence have already surpassed the herd. Power belongs to those who can wait. In that waiting, in that stillness, the voice beyond words speaks. And it says everything that noise never could.